The written word was very important because it was, you got all those books, the Bible, you got the different gospels and stuff that people are quite familiar with. Half the time, they didn't even need to read the subtitles. They could look at it and know what was going on. Mel Gibson has just shared a statement that's sending shockwaves through the Christian world. The actor and filmmaker best known for directing The Passion of the Christ claims there may be something hidden within one of the oldest versions of the Bible that most people have never heard about. According to Gibson, the ancient Ethiopian Bible contains a powerful prophecy describing the final days of humanity. He suggests that this passage presents a vivid and unsettling vision of the end times, one that is far more detailed and dramatic than what appears in the versions of the Bible most people read today. What makes this claim even more controversial is the idea that these writings may have been left out or removed from later biblical collections over time. If that's true, it raises difficult questions for historians and biblical scholars. What exactly was written in those ancient texts? And why aren't they included in the modern Bible now? Researchers, theologians, and curious readers alike are taking a closer look at these ancient manuscripts, trying to understand whether this mysterious prophecy was truly part of early biblical tradition, or if the story behind it is even more complicated than anyone expected. These aren't just small differences in wording or minor translation changes. The material being discussed includes entire chapters, complete timelines, and warnings that Jesus is said to have shared after his resurrection. According to the claim, these teachings were considered so powerful and potentially disruptive that they were kept out of widely circulated scriptures for nearly 2,000 years. That raises a troubling question. What kind of message could have been viewed as so dangerous that it remained hidden for centuries? And why does Ethiopia, a nation with one of the oldest continuous Christian traditions, appear to preserve texts that many other churches never included? The ancient Ethiopian Bible is often described as one of the most complete biblical collections in existence. Maintained by the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, it contains books and writings that were never officially recognized by the Roman Church. According to the discussion sparked by Mel Gibson, some of these ancient texts claim to record teachings Jesus delivered after his resurrection, teachings that reportedly include detailed warnings about the final days of humanity. Supporters of this idea say that descriptions go far beyond what most readers know from the Book of Revelation. For nearly 2,000 years, the story most Christians heard has remained largely the same. Jesus rose from the dead, appeared to his followers, and left behind a message of hope and salvation. But some researchers believe the ancient writings preserved in Ethiopia suggested a deeper and more complex account, one that many people in the Western world have never encountered before. Whether these texts truly reveal forgotten teachings or simply represent different early Christian traditions is still debated, but the conversation has reopened a fascinating historical question. How much of the earliest Christian message has been preserved, and how much might still be waiting to be rediscovered? For generations, these ancient writings were preserved by Ethiopian monks who carefully copied every page by hand. They believed these texts carried teachings that should never disappear with time. To them, the words of Jesus were too important to risk losing, especially the passages that spoke not of comfort but of warning. According to these old manuscripts, Jesus did not simply leave the earth after his resurrection without giving his followers deeper guidance. The texts claim that before ascending to heaven, he shared detailed insights about what humanity would face in the future. His words reportedly describe the final age of the world with striking clarity. In these accounts, Jesus spoke of a time when the spiritual heart of humanity would begin to grow cold. Truth, he warned, would often be replaced by spectacle and distraction. Leaders who appeared righteous on the outside would hide corruption beneath their robes, while the vulnerable and poor would suffer the consequences. One of the most significant texts associated with these traditions is known as the Book of the Covenant. Within the canon of the Ethiopian Bible, it is believed to record teachings Jesus shared with his disciples during the 40 days between his resurrection and his ascension. What makes the message in this book stand out is the level of detail it claims to provide. Rather than speaking in broad symbols or poetic imagery, the prophecy about the end times is presented as unusually direct, describing events and moral conditions with a precision that many readers find deeply unsettling. According to these ancient writings, Jesus explained that the final age of humanity would not begin with dramatic fire falling from the sky. Instead, it would start quietly with the gradual fading of human conscience. He described a future generation that would still recognize his name, yet no longer truly understand his message. People would continue building grand churches and cathedrals, but spiritually something essential would already be missing. In these accounts, Jesus warned that deception would not only come from distant places. False teachers, he said, would appear from within the very institutions built in his honor. They would speak passionately about heaven while focusing their efforts on gaining power and influence on earth. He cautioned that when his name is used to defend violence, justify greed, or silence the suffering of the poor, it would be a sign that a critical moment in history is approaching. The prophecy then turns to changes in the natural world. Jesus reportedly spoke about earthquakes, floods, and unusual events in the sky, phenomena that would puzzle even the most knowledgeable observers. But in the text, he explains that these events should not be seen simply as punishments. Instead, they are described as signals, early signs of a profound transition. He compares them to the pains that come before the birth of something new. The earth itself, he suggests, will seem to tremble and groan, almost as if creation senses what is ahead, even when people living on it have forgotten. Many readers today feel that these warnings sound strikingly relevant to modern times. In the Ethiopian Bible, one passage describes Jesus looking directly at his disciples and telling them not to fear the shaking of the earth itself. Instead, he urged them to fear something far more dangerous, the stillness of hearts that have grown completely cold. Another ancient Ethiopian text known as the Didascalia of the Apostles is also said to expand on these themes, adding further insight into the warnings and prophecies connected to the final age. These writings also describe a powerful warning Jesus is said to have given to his followers about a final global system of power. According to the text, this empire would not rule through obvious force or visible chains. Instead, it would be far more subtle. Most people would live within it without ever realizing they were trapped. In this vision, the system maintains control not through fear, but through comfort. People are given food, entertainment, and a sense of security, and this is presented to them as freedom. Yet the message in the text suggests something deeper is happening beneath the surface. The writings say that those who recognize this reality and still choose compassion and truth will be the truly blessed. Those who continue searching for truth, even in a time when the world seems full of easy answers and artificial abundance, are described as the ones who will endure. Some readers believe that if the end times prophecy preserved in the Ethiopian Bible were widely studied, it could challenge many common assumptions about the final days. That raises an even bigger question. What other warnings or insights might still be hidden within ancient religious texts that few people have explored? These same writings also offer a striking vision of what the last days might feel like from the perspective of those living through them. According to the passages, Jesus says that in the final age, his message will rise again, but not from places of power or influence. Instead, it will come from unexpected voices, from deserts, from prisons, and from people the world has forgotten. The text suggests that his spirit will speak through those ignored by the powerful. And one of the most unsettling ideas it presents is this: the people who believe they are the most prepared for the end times may actually be the last to recognize when those moments arrive. For many readers, this perspective completely challenges the comfortable expectations often associated with teachings about the rapture and the final days, turning many familiar assumptions upside down. Ethiopia's long and unique Christian history helps explain why these ancient texts were preserved for so many centuries. Christianity reached the region in the 4th century, making it one of the oldest Christian traditions in the world. Over time, however, Ethiopian Christianity developed largely separated from the authority of Rome. Because of that long period of isolation, many scholars believe the country preserved a broader and sometimes more mystical collection of early Christian writings. Within the Ethiopian Bible, the story of the end times is portrayed somewhat differently from the versions most people in the West are familiar with. In these writings, the final days are not described simply as a chain of disasters or catastrophic events. Instead, they are framed as a deep spiritual struggle, one that takes place inside the heart of every human being. According to these passages, Jesus explains that the ultimate conflict will not be fought between nations or armies. Rather, it will be a struggle between truth and the human desire for comfort, between the awakening of the spirit and the quiet sleep of people who feel satisfied with the world as it is. Some traditions connected to Ethiopian Christianity also suggest reasons why certain end-times teachings never became widely accepted in Western churches. One explanation sometimes mentioned is the issue of authority and structure. The idea that God's Spirit might speak directly to ordinary, humble people rather than only through established institutions could have been viewed as challenging to centralized religious power. Another factor often discussed is the mystical nature of many of these writings. The Ethiopian texts include vivid visions, descriptions of angelic gatherings, and complex timelines describing cosmic events. Over the centuries, some Western church leaders regarded these kinds of mystical themes as controversial or even heretical, which may have contributed to them being left out of later biblical traditions connected to Roman Catholic Church. As a result, Ethiopia preserved a version of early Christian literature that in some ways feels very different from the one that shaped much of Western Christianity. A third explanation sometimes suggested is simple fear, real unsettling fear. Some believe that church authorities worried that if people read these words for themselves, they might begin to wonder whether the events described as the end times were not just a distant future, but something already unfolding around them. According to several writings preserved in the Ethiopian Bible, Jesus is said to have described the final age as unfolding in 4 stages. The first stage is called the age of forgetting, a time when people gradually stop searching for truth. Faith becomes routine. Curiosity fades, and the deeper meaning of spiritual life slowly slips away. The second stage is described as the age of spectacle. In this period, constant noise, distraction, and entertainment begin to replace wisdom and reflection. People become so surrounded by stimulation that quiet truth is easily overlooked. The third stage is known as the age of the false shepherd. Here, the writings warn of leaders who claim to speak in God's name but use religion to gain power or control. Instead of guiding people toward truth, they manipulate belief for their own purposes. The fourth and final stage is what the text calls the Great Silence. This is not a peaceful silence, but a spiritual one. It describes a moment when the connection between heaven and earth feels so distant that even those sincerely searching for God struggle to sense that presence. Yet, the writings also say that at the deepest point of that silence, just before everything seems lost, something changes. Jesus speaks of a fire returning to the world not to destroy it, but to awaken it one last time. Despite the seriousness of these warnings, the Ethiopian end times texts end with a message that is surprisingly hopeful. In one passage, Jesus says that the end is not the end of life itself, it is the end of deception. What comes, he says, is not destruction for its own sake, but a cleansing that removes what is false. And within that message is a promise. Those who chose love and truth, even when the world around them chose comfort, power, or illusion, will not be forgotten. They will not be recognized by status or glory, but by the marks of what they endured. In that sense, these ancient writings present the end times not as an escape from the world, but as a profound transformation of it. If Ethiopia truly preserved a forgotten prophecy about the end times attributed to Christ, then an important question follows. What warnings do these ancient texts claim to reveal about the world we live in today? According to some interpretations of the Ethiopian Bible, the teachings about the final days go far beyond the familiar descriptions found in the Book of Revelation. Rather than presenting only symbolic visions, these writings describe a more detailed spiritual narrative about the signs that will appear before the end of an age. The text suggests that the real seals of the end times are not only cosmic events, but inner transformations, moments when the human soul is forced to confront truth, illusion, and the choices people make about how they live. Some traditions connected with Ethiopian Christianity say that after his resurrection, Jesus shared deeper teachings with his disciples, teachings that were never fully recorded in the commonly known Gospels. For centuries, Ethiopian monks are believed to have carefully preserved these writings, convinced they contained an important spiritual map for understanding the final era of humanity. In these accounts, Jesus explains that many people will misunderstand the signs of the end times. Instead of recognizing the changes happening in human behavior and values, people will search for dramatic signs in the sky or catastrophic events. But according to these writings, the true signals will appear much closer to home in the breakdown of relationships, the commercialization of love, and a growing culture centered on self-worship. One passage suggests that when a generation begins creating idols in its own image, it may be standing at a critical turning point in history. For many modern readers, that idea feels strangely familiar in an age shaped by selfies, personal branding, and digital identities built through algorithms and social media. Because of that, these ancient warnings can feel less like distant prophecy and more like a mirror reflecting the challenges of the world today. According to certain ancient Ethiopian writings, Jesus spoke about a future age that he seemed to recognize long before it arrived. These texts suggest that he described the spiritual conditions of that time with remarkable clarity. Another section of the end times teaching preserved in the Ethiopian Bible speaks about something called the two harvests. The idea is that in the final age, two powerful forces will grow side by side, a deepening darkness and a powerful awakening. This vision doesn't describe a world that slowly becomes better over time. Instead, it presents a world being pulled in two directions at once, as the prophecy describes it. Darkness will intensify, but light will also become stronger, and the space in between the comfortable middle, where people remain neutral or indifferent, will gradually disappear. In this teaching, Jesus tells his disciples that a time will come when people will no longer be able to remain in that grey area. Each person, the text suggests, will eventually face a moment of choice about what they truly stand for. Before his ascension, these writings say Jesus shared what they call the 7 seals of the heart. Unlike the dramatic cosmic seals described in the Book of Revelation, these seals are deeply personal. They represent inner barriers that keep people from fully awakening spiritually. The first is the seal of comfort, the tendency to avoid truths that might disturb our sense of security. The second is the seal of pride, the belief that our own understanding is already complete and that we have nothing more to learn. The third is the seal of fear, when the desire for safety becomes stronger than the search for truth. The fourth is the seal of distraction, filling every moment with noise or activity, so that deeper reflection and the quiet voice of conscience can never be heard. The fifth is the seal of false community, surrounding ourselves only with people who reinforce what we already believe. The sixth is the seal of false mercy, using ideas like forgiveness as an excuse to avoid real change or accountability. And the seventh seal, described as the most dangerous, is the seal of empty religion. This is when sacred language, rituals, and traditions are used to avoid facing the living, transformative reality of faith itself. According to these writings, when a person breaks through all 7 of these inner seals, something profound happens. They no longer wait for a sign or miracle to arrive from the sky. Instead, they themselves become part of the awakening they were hoping to see. For many readers, this idea feels strikingly relevant today, which is why some believe these ancient teachings speak directly to the challenges of our own time. Some people believe we are living in a time unlike any before, a world overflowing with comfort yet spiritually restless. It's a world where religious language is sometimes used as a tool of influence by those in power. A world where millions still attend church, yet many quietly feel a deep emptiness inside. Despite being more connected through technology than ever before, people often experience an intense sense of loneliness. At the heart of the end times teachings preserved in the Ethiopian Bible is an idea that can feel both unsettling and deeply hopeful. These writings suggest that what is coming is not the destruction of the world itself, but the end of deception. According to this view, the end is really the collapse of the lies that have shaped human society. Those who are willing to let go of those illusions, who break the inner barriers described in the prophecy and choose truth and compassion, are said to play a role in what comes next. Rather than simply surviving the changes ahead, they become part of the reason the world is still worth saving. If these ancient Ethiopian traditions truly preserve such a powerful message, it raises an intriguing question. Could Ethiopia itself have been the place where these teachings were meant to be protected? The story most Christians know is familiar. Jesus was betrayed, suffered, and was crucified, a sacrifice believed to bring salvation to humanity. That story has been told for centuries in churches around the world, written in the Bible, depicted in paintings, and reflected in stained glass windows. Yet another perspective, one many Christians have never encountered, has long been preserved in Ethiopia. Some of the ancient manuscripts kept in its monasteries claim that before ascending to heaven, Jesus shared a final message with his disciples, a prophecy describing the spiritual condition of the world in its final age. Among Ethiopian scholars, This tradition is sometimes referred to as the prophecy of the final witness. Unlike gentler interpretations of the end times, this account speaks about the future in direct and serious terms. It attempts to describe the generation that would live through those events with striking detail. The history of Christianity in Ethiopia is also unique. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, one of the oldest Christian traditions in the world, traces its spiritual heritage to the legendary figure Menelik I, believed in Ethiopian tradition to be the son of King Solomon and Queen of Sheba. Unlike the spread of Christianity through political empires elsewhere, Ethiopia's faith developed largely through spiritual practices such as prayer, fasting, and monastic life. Inside ancient monasteries in places like Lalibela and Aksum, monks carefully preserved sacred scrolls and manuscripts. Many of these texts were written in Ge'ez, an ancient language that remains part of Ethiopia's religious tradition today. For centuries, these writings were copied by hand and protected within monastery walls, waiting for the day when the rest of the world might finally become curious about what they contain. These ancient writings describe a vision of Jesus that goes beyond a message of personal salvation. In these texts, he is also portrayed as delivering a profound warning about the future of humanity, a future where truth itself could one day be rejected or even crucified by the world. In this version of this prophecy, Jesus tells his disciples that the final witness of the last days will not be an angel or a dramatic cosmic event. Instead, it will be something far more unexpected, an ordinary generation of people who rise up during a time of deep darkness and choose not to remain silent. According to the passage, these people will not be celebrated by the powerful. They may be mocked, ignored, or even pushed aside by the influential voices of their time. Their ideas might be excluded from public platforms and religious institutions. Yet the prophecy says their voices will still reach those who truly need to hear them, not through grand stages or mass audiences, but through the quiet influence they have on individuals who are ready to listen. In one line from the text, Jesus reassures his followers that truth does not depend on public approval or loud amplification. Even if a voice is silenced in public, the message itself can still travel where it matters most. Some scholars connected to the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church believe that certain prophecies like this were left out of the versions of Scripture that later became dominant in Western Christianity. They sometimes point to early church gatherings, such as the First Council of Nicaea, where church leaders debated doctrine and the role of various texts within Christian teaching. According to these interpretations, prophecies suggesting that religious institutions themselves could struggle with corruption in the final days may have been viewed as controversial or destabilizing at the time. Whether or not these interpretations are historically accurate remains widely debated among historians and theologians, but the existence of these Ethiopian traditions continues to raise fascinating questions about how early Christian teachings were preserved, interpreted, and passed down through the centuries. According to this interpretation of the prophecy, one of the most unsettling ideas is that some of the most misleading voices of the final age would not appear obviously evil. Instead, they would look deeply religious, wearing crosses, building churches, and speaking in the language of faith. Because of how controversial such a claim could be, some believe these words were too threatening to be widely included in later Christian traditions. In this view, while other regions moved away from these teachings, Ethiopia continued to preserve them. Whether someone sees this prophecy as literal history or as a symbolic spiritual warning, the message raises an important question for every generation. It invites people to look carefully at the world around them and ask themselves, are the signs described in these writings already unfolding? Are we living in the kind of age those ancient texts were warning about? And if so, how will people respond? By choosing the comfort of easy answers or by facing the more difficult path of truth? The tradition, sometimes called the prophecy of the final witness, does not appear in the Bibles most commonly used in Western Christianity. Yet the themes it explores, truth, deception, courage, and spiritual awakening, continue to feel surprisingly relevant today, almost like a reflection of challenges that could appear in tomorrow's headlines. If these Ethiopian traditions truly preserved a powerful message about the future, it raises another fascinating question. Why Ethiopia? Ethiopia stands out as one of the oldest continuously existing civilizations in the world. Its history stretches back thousands of years and is deeply connected to stories of faith, endurance, and cultural strength. Unlike many other African nations, Ethiopia largely maintained its independence during the colonial era, allowing it to safeguard its traditions, languages, and ancient religious manuscripts. Because of this independence, Ethiopia was able to protect sacred texts and historical traditions in ways that many other regions could not. Within its monasteries and churches, generations of scholars and monks preserved manuscripts that had been copied and studied for centuries. Some Ethiopian traditions even connect the nation's origins to ancient biblical history. In certain accounts, people trace their ancestry back to Ham, one of the sons of Noah. While these traditions are part of religious heritage rather than universally accepted history, they illustrate how deeply Ethiopia's identity is intertwined with the stories and beliefs of the ancient world. Because of its long and unique history, Ethiopia is often viewed as more than just a nation. Many people see it as a living connection to the ancient biblical world, one of humanity's oldest civilizations, deeply shaped by spiritual tradition. Faith has always played a central role in Ethiopian identity. Long before Christianity spread widely across Europe, the message of Christ had already taken root in Ethiopia. Historical records show that Christianity became established there as early as the 4th century. Unlike in some parts of the world where religion spread through imperial expansion, in Ethiopia, it was largely embraced by the people themselves and fiercely protected as part of their culture. In the 6th century AD, the traveler Cosmas Indicopleustes visited the region and described Ethiopia as a strong and deeply devoted Christian nation. In his writing, he noted that Ethiopian rulers often welcomed Christians who were fleeing persecution in other lands, offering them refuge when few other places would. Some Ethiopian traditions even claim that certain communities practiced forms of biblical faith for thousands of years. While historians debate the exact timelines, there is no doubt that Ethiopia is home to one of the oldest continuous Christian traditions in the world, preserved through centuries of devotion and cultural resilience. The Ethiopian Church also protects one of the most extensive versions of the Bible ever preserved. The King James Bible, widely used in the West, contains 66 books. By contrast, the Ethiopian Bible includes 88 books. Among these additional writings are ancient texts such as the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, which are not included in most modern Bibles. Many of these ancient manuscripts were written in Ge'ez, a language few people can read today. Because of this and the isolation of Ethiopian monasteries, these writings remained largely unknown for centuries. Recently, comments from Mel Gibson renewed interest in the Ethiopian Bible. It exists in two traditions: a broader canon of about 81 books, and a narrower one of around 72 books later recognized officially by Haile Selassie. Because Ethiopia preserved its ancient faith and independence, many see it as a guardian of early Christian traditions. What are your thoughts on the Ethiopian Bible and its perspective on prophecy? Let us know in the comments, and thanks for watching.